Hello, and welcome to the Unfiltered Podcast, and welcome to my unfiltered guest, Ronnell Richards. Thank you so much for joining today. So honored to have you on here and to learn about your story. For those of you that are just tuning in for the first time, Unfiltered is the podcast to talk about servant leadership. This is where we have unfiltered guests sharing their stories of how they serve others, the sort of impact that they're making on the world to involve others, using their influence to help them rise and to inspire them to be better versions of themselves, to be better human beings. And that's why we got you on here, Ronnell. We want to hear your
All
story
right.
and what you're doing to help others and what you're doing to become that better version of yourself every day. Welcome.
Wow, that's a big build-up, Mohammed. I appreciate it, my friend. Thanks for the invite. I'm super excited to hop on today,
So glad to
and
have you here.
yeah, ready to get this party started, my friend.
Tell my listeners, who are you? What gets you out of bed? What gets you motivated? And what do you do every day?
Just come straight out with the big beefy question. Who are you? What is the meaning of life? What gets me out of bed? You know, Mohammed, for me, it's been something that's continued to evolve through my life. You know, my professional career now spans 23, 24 years, and it's as you know, you reach these different levels, and the things that are important change. And for a long time, what got me out was wanting to conquer, right? To go out there and it's kind of that chip on your shoulder and really wanting to achieve and being super ambitious. And that ambition hasn't gone anywhere, but it's just kind of focused in a different direction now. I think it was a little bit more inward before. It was more about me, more about doing great things and proving people right or proving people wrong. And you know, now at this stage for me, it's evolved. It's more about I certainly want to make impact, but the impact that I'm trying to make and want to make is it's more on those that are around me now, as opposed to, you know, stacking up awards and personal accolades.
Well, you know, it sounds a bit cliche to say, what are you doing and what impact you're making? But when we're talking about, everybody is still in the midst of a pandemic right now. We're talking about, you know, here in Canada, we're in a lockdown, and I'm sure where you are, things are, you know, it can get pretty scary with what's going on with COVID around the world. And so we do need something to inspire us to get up every day and know that we can make a difference. And that self-awareness
Yeah.
that you're talking about, moving from where we're so focused on what we're doing for ourselves, you know, what we need to get out of bed. Similar to you, I realize that what gets me up and wanting to do something and make an impact and make a difference is I can bring in those accolades. I can say, hey, here's what I'm doing. Look at me. But giving and giving back really gets me going. It gets me motivated to want to make that difference. And I hear that that's what you're doing. Can you give me examples of where did that switch on and switch off for you, that, hey, yeah, I care about Ronald. I want to do great things for him. But you know what? It's being of service to others that's really making a difference. When did this
So
happen?
so before we kind of go there, you touched on something that
Yeah.
I think that maybe we want to segue a little bit into. You know, we're in pandemic, right? And everyone has experienced loss, right? We're in this global depression, whether it's that you personally lost someone, which I have through this thing, and I'm not unique. Lots of people have, but we're in this global sort of malaise, right? One of the things that I've seen, I've kind of learned through this, and I'm kind of really applying in my life, is that, you know, first of all, before I go here, Mohammed, you said unfiltered, right? This is the Unfiltered Podcast. So what does unfiltered mean in Canada? Because
it means you say what you want, buddy. This is unfiltered.
All right. So as we're dealing with loss, and, you know, a lot of us are dealing with personal loss, and folks that, you know, I lost someone that was very, very close to me. And in fact, the exact same age, childhood best friend, all that sort of thing. But what you learn and what you see through this, and through going through this with people that are close to you, is that, Mom, the shit doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. As I sat in his room, and there's these things that he valued a lot, right? That now the family is looking at, okay, well, do we take this through the Goodwill or Salvation Army, or we throw it away, or whatever? And it just it's it just has resonated in me so strongly that a lot of the stuff, the shit, just doesn't matter. This we just had New Year's Eve, and I had this bottle of wine that I've been holding on to for years. Right, it was given to me by the vintner, and special. It was supposed to be special, and I'm holding on to it. I'm like, why the hell am I holding on to this? Like, I cracked that bad boy open and sucked it down with the hamburger, like, just because we have the present, and just nothing else is promised for us. The stuff that we hold on to, whether it's physical things or other things that can kind of get in the way of our progress and our success, we just got to get rid of. I think it's so important right now when we're in the midst of this pandemic, where yes, all of us are experiencing loss. Whether you've lost someone in your life or not, you're experiencing loss. You're experiencing loss of physical contact with people, all different types of things. So, I just, you had touched on something, and I didn't want to not share that with your audience. Just a little something that has really impacted me, and I think might help some folks out there. Now, back to your question in terms of serving. It's part of my DNA, right? I grew up in a household where it very, very much centered on family. We always had different family members coming and living with us, and my dad was always helping someone, and we had foster kids that my dad was trying to help, all types of things. So I've always had this great sense of community that was instilled in me at an early age. But I think as I entered into the business world, while I've always had that sense of community and I cared about people, it was maybe a little more caring about, you care about them, but I'm the number one focus, right? Like, how can these relationships benefit me, right? And what I've learned over time, and what you kind of come to learn, is that can be super empty. And that you actually get way more by giving and pouring into people without any sort of expectation, of return. And it's funny how I don't know, the spiritual thing, whatever, it just is what it is. When you put that great energy out there, when you are putting into people, again, without any expectation of return, long term, those things always come back to you. Whether it's opportunity or just that great feeling when you lay down, put your head on the pillow at night, that that you're doing something good in the world. And here's the funny thing, is sometimes when you're doing these things, and I'm condensing my 24, 25, whatever it is, 23 or 25 years. At some point, you can't keep adding years, right? Like, you kind of start taking some away because it sounds like you're too old. So 23 to 25 years or whatever. Through that, over that, that period of time, and sometimes you put into people, and selflessly, and they don't necessarily appreciate it. They don't appreciate it, or in fact, sometimes it can be not only they don't appreciate it, they resent you, right? Mm-hmm. I've had that happen. And what I've had to learn through that is that that's okay. They may not be ready to receive it, but in the long term, it helps me to sleep at night. When I put my head down on the pillow, I feel great because I know that I've done something right, even though they may not necessarily appreciate it or respect it or understand it at the moment, right? This is just another one of those lessons you kind of learn in kind of trying to give selflessly and leadership, right? So,
what I just felt when you spoke, you're talking about a journey of love. And we don't normally bring this language into business. We talk about currency, we talk about transactions, we talk about, What can I do for you? What can you do for me? Right? And
Yeah.
it's like you said, what can you do for me? And so many businesses in our capitalist society, we're focused, we want to do good, we want to do well, but we're focused on us. We're focused on how can I give back to my stakeholders? How can I increase our coffers? How can I get our profits to go up? And we forget the people part of it.
Mhm.
What I heard from you is this journey of having gone from what can I do for myself to how can I benefit myself through the service of others? And if they respect it, if they like it, if they embrace it, awesome. If they don't, what can I continue doing to benefit others? And that takes a
Yeah.
lot, and I sense that you have spirituality in you, or and maybe even a recently acknowledged spirituality that is helping you flourish. I can feel it right here when you've talked about I used to focus on me and I'm really focusing on others now. I think the things that wake us up sometimes, this awareness that there's something bigger than what's in us. There's something
Hmm.
bigger in this world, whether you want to call it a universe, whether you call it God, whether you call it service to others. It's the same language. And I think it's the language of love. If you listen to people, what you ultimately end up doing is learning about them. When you learn about them, you start caring compassionately. And compassion is another word for love. And when you
Yeah.
love people, you not only learn to lead in a way that you inspire them, but you learn to help them lead in a way that they get inspired to want to do what you're doing. It's contagious. Love really, this goes back to something that sounds cliche, but there's a reason these things became cliche and maybe a little overused. When we say love makes the world go round, right now, when we look at what's happening everywhere, particularly, I mean, we were in the midst of a pandemic. And I'll tell you, here in London, Ontario, we're about 450,000 people. We were locked down. And I'm not just saying this because you're Black, by the way. I'm not going on this segue because you're Black, right? But I want to share with you that part of what I do on this podcast is amplify voices that have been silenced, not that are silent, but silenced, that we've shut down for centuries because we live in societies where there's colonization and slavery exists. And I don't just mean slavery to Black people, I mean slavery to our souls and to us becoming better human beings. But yes, when we look at what happened this past year with George Floyd, here in London, Ontario, 10,000 people came out of their homes out of a pandemic. We were told don't go outside, but 10,000 people came into a city park where we converged and we stood in solidarity with Black people and people of color and people from uh, minority communities here in our city because we said enough shit. Like
Hmm.
this, we can't call this 2020 and still feel like it's the 70s, where gender discrimination and women, now in COVID are being told, go back and take care of your families. We have to think, where are we going? What world are we creating? And
Yeah.
you and I can't live in equal spaces if I can't sit back and make room for you at the table and break bread with you and make sure that you feel that you are belonging in the conversations and in the activities that we have. It's a matter, diversity is a fact, inclusion is a choice where we're intentional, but belonging is
Hmm.
where you and I are sitting at the same table, what we're doing here. And when you speak, forget the virtual, forget this distance, I could feel the love and in your desire to make a difference. And I want to ask you, was there something that prompted this awakening, this awareness to shift you from, hey, what's in it for me, to what can I do for others?
Oh my God. So, Muhammad, you've unintentionally really touched a nerve.
I do that sometimes.
um, and so we don't have near enough time to delve into this, but what what you may not know and your audience doesn't surely doesn't know is that attention to self and that focus on self is not all something that is just superficial and um, unnecessary. It was very necessary. It was very necessary. Listen, when you're trying to achieve and you're achieving things in a world that isn't quite ready for you to achieve, and where you have to sit in rooms with people that don't have anything in common with you, and quite frankly aren't necessarily rooting for your success. It takes a tremendous amount of belief in self and perseverance. And so while I kind of oversimplified it a little bit in terms of that attention on self, it was necessary. It was. I wouldn't have achieved the things that I've achieved without it. And I've seen that. I've seen great, smart people not be able to achieve that level of success because of the environment, right? The environment being too difficult. So for me, again, you didn't expect any of this. I was raised in a household. I'll told you a little bit about my background. I've been in Atlanta for 18 years, but I lived in Utah I grew up in Utah. Less than 1% of the population are African American. And so if you're going to achieve in environments like that, you better have a whole lot of damn confidence. It's not just work. It's not work. It's intelligence, and it's a belief in self, a ridiculous belief in self. And I always thank my parents because, when you go out into a world, and the environment out there, when you walk outside the door, tells you that you don't belong, right? And it's not necessarily, hey, you don't belong here. It's just when you go, if you live in a world where you don't ever see people that are like you doing great things, well, you're just not going to think you can do great things, right? So anyway, my parents, and I'm really giving you a short and condensed version of this, but my parents were very intentional in how they raised me and helped me to build a stupid amount of confidence, like confidence that I shouldn't have had. But their genius, unintentional genius, maybe it was intentional and whatever, unintentional genius is that, hey, look, this world is going to be difficult for our son. And so he has to not only believe that he's good enough, he has to believe that he's better. Because if he doesn't believe that he's better, this world will beat him down. So that's part of what made me get successful, or if you want, whatever you want to call it, in that world, in the business world and all that. But, again, we always had this great sense of community and family, right? My parents are entrepreneurs, always did stuff in the community. And told you a little bit about family members, foster kids, all those sorts of things. So I always have had this community thing. But again, to achieve success out in this world, I had to have this tremendous belief in myself and confidence, overconfidence in some respect. But to your question about when that kind of changed, now keep in mind, I've always been rooted in community. I've always been rooted in people, right? But just like with most of us, it's usually trauma that is the catalyst in us moving in some different directions. And it's no different with me. That was the catalyst in having a business that I was very successful in, fell after 13, 14 years. And when you've built something over that period of time, you're identified by that thing, right? Like that's you're that success. And then when you go through the loss, it's, first of all, it's extremely humbling, but it's also kind of brings you to this point of understanding that didn't matter as much as you thought that it was, and that those things can go and they can come and go. And if your identity is built up in that, you're gonna have some issues. And so, what really lasts and what really endures is the relationships and the impact, right, that you can make. So in that company that I ran for 13, 14 years, I have people that call me all the time, message me that worked for me, that I made impact in their lives. And so understanding, like, that's what it was really about. It wasn't about the company, it wasn't about the cars, the houses, all that stuff. It was about making the impact in people's lives. That's what endures. And that is what's going to, at the end of the day, be whatever legacy it is that I leave or anyone leaves.
Thank you for being really unfiltered. And I'm not just saying that. Thank you for being transparent and honest and raw. And yeah, I can tell you that's what I aim for on this podcast. But more importantly is thank you for allowing me to be part of what you shared and for sharing that with the listeners. Because the more we do that, the more we let people know it's okay, the more people will feel comfortable, the less they have to feel they have to work so hard and claw their way out of positions where others try to put us because they don't feel that we belong or we have what it takes to belong here. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. No,
I, you know,
I'm always happy to share my truth. Always
thank you.
happy to share my
Thank you.
truth because
And I bless you. I ask for blessings from a greater force to always help you let that truth shine because I my intention wasn't just to go down the road and call you out because you're black. But I think we have to
Mhm.
tell these stories. I think we have to continue telling these stories because we live in a world where we're not having enough of these conversations. I
Yeah.
don't want to be reactionary. I don't want it to be tokenism. I don't want it to be, hey, let's do this now because this is what the current environment is all about, or something just happened. So what do we do? No, this isn't about me going to read a good book on what it's like to be diverse and inclusive and belong, talk about belonging, because black people are getting killed all across the states, right? Or even here in Canada. This is about what can I do to be proactive? What can we do? Yeah, go ahead.
Muhammad, you had touched on, you said you didn't bring this up because I'm black. Here's the real,
You are
I
black.
am,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
that
Thank you.
matters.
It
That
matters.
matters.
Thank you.
Um, all of, I think there is this, what I think is a not false, just maybe an, a people meaning well, right? They mean well, but to bring us more into some utopian society where it doesn't matter, right? That's what people think.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people want. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't judge you, you don't judge me. We're all the same. But we're not the same.
Yeah.
And our differences are that's where the beauty is. So it's about
Yes.
embracing those differences and understanding those differences
That's what makes us
and
stronger.
reaching common ground.
I
Like,
love it.
while we have these beautiful differences, we also have these great commonalities too, right? And so let's not hide from that. Let's not say, oh, I don't want to say black, or I don't want to say Muslim, or I don't want to say Buddhist. No, we all are who we are. Let's embrace it. Let's educate and just for me, it's about being in more of an accepting society and getting rid of the fear. A lot of this negative stuff that we're talking about and that we're dealing with, whether it was, whether it's the things that you had mentioned or other stuff, but a lot of it comes down to fear. People
Yeah.
are just afraid. They're
And
afraid that an opportunity for you means something's
less of an
coming away
opportunity
from
for them.
them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you brother, we're speaking the same language. I see you. I don't want to be colorblind. I want to be color bold. I want to use our differences to celebrate, you know, our differences. I want to celebrate our strengths and I want to find the commonality. And even when we don't agree, that's okay. But I want to say, I see you. And as a
Yeah.
Muslim here, right? I can relate, I can empathize, but I can't walk in your shoes. I can imagine what it feels like. And that is all that I can do. And that's a lot that I want to do. But I also want to sing the praises of people who are doing this every day because I think it takes a lot of courage to walk in the streets of America and be a Black person. It takes a lot of courage to be a role model for others and say you can work hard. You can be a role model for others. You can show youth what it's like to be young and Black and successful in America. You can do it. And you shouldn't have to work harder than anybody else. That's maybe the society where I think we want to move towards, not one where we're negating our say, hey, where we all love each other, let's say kumbaya. No, it's a matter of I know you worked your ass off to get to where you are, and I appreciate you for it, and I value you even more for it. And hopefully, the next generation of Muslims or Jews or Christians or Black or Indigenous don't have to work as hard as you and I do. Don't have to get bullied. Don't have to be discriminated against. We shouldn't have to put people crossing borders into cages because they don't belong. We have to
Well,
recognize, right?
and Muhammad, you're right, but they will. They
Work
will.
hard.
Here's no. It will be different for them. Here's the thing. Um, one of the issues that I think that we have, in North America here, I'm talking about U.S. and Canada, is in some ways we don't recognize the progress. Like, yes, we're not where we want to be, and we should not accept that. But do you know what? My grandfather worked in a steel mill for 40 years. He worked in a steel mill in Ohio, and couldn't get promoted, couldn't be in management, had the worst jobs that you could get because steel mills were segregated. That was his reality. And he raised 17 kids.
Wow.
Like, yes, it's not equitable yet. No, we're not. But you know what? Jesus, we do need to acknowledge that there has been growth, and there has been, because for in some ways, when we don't acknowledge it, it kind of disrespects what my grandfather went through and
When
what
they've
and what
had to
his father went through.
sacrifice to
Yes,
give you,
to get exactly.
Yeah.
And so I've never looked at my lot as being harder or sacrificing anything, because I have so much respect for those that came before me that I'm like, yo, it is what it is. The minute Barack Obama became president, I said, we lose any excuse. Like, this dude, like, the odds of that happening and how perfect he had to be. So, like, it's not, again, an acceptance of things. It's an understanding, because like anything in life, once you understand where you accept things for what they really are, that's how you can really make change.
It's
Right?
the awareness.
That's how you can really make change and be successful.
Love it. This is where we get to the part of the podcast, Ronnell, where I ask you, what is something that you've lived through, something that you've experienced, some awakening that you've had that you want to share with others to help them become better leaders, better human beings?
I would just go back to kind of what I alluded to earlier in how being someone that's giving and thinking of others, there's going to come times when the people that you are, especially when you're in a leadership position, okay, leadership is hard. You're making decisions for people's lives that sometimes they're just simply not going to appreciate or understand or respect, and they might resent you for it. So because of that, some of you might want to change yourself and change how you do things to protect yourself from that. I would just say that don't do it. I wouldn't, it's not necessarily an awakening for me, but it's something that I have come to learn over time, is that I'm just not going to let those sorts of things change who I am at the end of the day. And I see a lot of leaders that I talk to and I coach and consult that do allow that to affect them, to change who they are at their core. And don't do it, because at the end of the day, you gotta live with yourself. They'll come around or they won't, but when you've done the right things by them, you're better off for it.
And that belief in yourself, that's what's going to get you out of bed every day. And I'm glad you got out of bed to spend some time with me and to share your story. And totally not expecting to hear what I did today. Thank you for being raw. Thank you for being my unfiltered guest. God bless. All the best to you, and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Take care.